Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we follow that great saying from Benjamin Franklin, and that quite simply was question authority. So we go a little bit deeper than you'll usually hear on the network corporate press. Anyway, before I get started with tonight's topic, I would encourage people to go ahead and subscribe. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Keep updated on new shows. And follow me on Twitter at PsychoMike777. Okay, what I want to deal with this episode is basically sports. And essentially what I'd like to deal with is how perhaps I think we have kind of lost sight of the purpose of sports, and it's just part of the tools of manipulation that are used by essentially the powers that be to maintain the current status quo and societal order. And I'll explain that in much greater detail. So, the thing is, let's just take a quote that's often attributed to George Orwell, and it is that, I think it's more of a paraphrase really, but it's the quote you'll usually find summarized from Orwell, and that is, "Football, beer, and above all gambling filled up the horizon of their minds. To keep them in control was not difficult." Now, here he was talking about the great masses, the proletariat. Like in 1984, it's called the proles. You got to remember, actually, for those who have read 1984, that Winston was actually not just a regular person. He was part of the propaganda machine apparatus. It was his job to rewrite stories, to manipulate the masses, to alter history. And so he was a party official. All right? He was not, part of the great masses who just were basically used for their labor and nothing more, and appreciated for no more than that. And the interesting thing is that the power to control a civilization, to control a people, ultimately rest on the idea that the great majority of your people just kind of do their thing. Okay, there's that saying that you can't have too many chiefs. Well, that actually goes against participatory democracy, but it seems to be the way things are. If you take a look at research that has been done on social conformity and compliance and so forth, you will generally find that about 3/4 of the population will just kind of go along to get along. They don't really take part. They don't get active. They don't get involved in any kind of political types of activities aside from maybe going out and voting, which voting is important. Okay, I'm not one of those cynics that say, oh, don't contribute to the system. But ultimately, if you really want to have an impact on society, it's better to magnify that impact. Now, there's a small minority of people who do stay well informed. Many of them, though, may think they're informed. If you look at, Mark Twain did a quote about newspapers where he said that those who do not read the newspaper are uninformed. Those who read the newspaper are misinformed. Okay, and I think you can relate to that. That ultimately, a lot of the people who do participate may just get their information from network corporate media, and if they do any research, it's only going to be within the standard boundaries of research. They're not going to really dig deep. And then there's a small minority on both the right and the left who actually strive to find out more about what's going on. So they'll actually do their research. Now, to keep the masses, though, happy, okay, because you can't have a situation where suddenly everyone is getting informed and wanting to have a say, or at least that's a very elitist way of looking at it, but I think that's the way the elite really do look at things. You got to have distractions. Now, if you look at Roman society, the gladiator games were a major distraction. It kept people's minds on who was winning, who was doing this, and who was doing that. Often we have often we don't realize that the gladiator games themselves were not this big bloody spectacle. Those were usually what you would call exhibition games, where you would kill off some criminals. You might have a situation where you throw in some slaves or conquered people. You might, execute some Christians or whatever, dissidents. Those were more of an exhibition game. Those were basically just, you knew that what was going to happen was the person was going to be knocked out. If you remember the scene from Idiocracy, it's supposed to be set in the future, where the main character is just thrown out there in this arena and they're trying to run over him with these giant monster trucks. That would be considered an exhibition game. But most of the time the gladiators were not. They were not you didn't want to kill them. These were their owners had a great deal of money invested in them. And they would go out and they would actually fight, but not to the death. And if one did accidentally get injured to the point that maybe he lost a hand, and in those days, medical technology was not so great, so that pretty much was a death sentence, then the person in charge of the games, and they didn't use a thumb, they used a different, I can't show you here, but they used a different symbol that would mean, get him out of his misery. And so that would be how that was done. Now, they also had coliseums in all the major cities. Okay? I've been to the one in Rome. It's big. It's impressive. That's what they did the whole show with Russell Crowe in it, Gladiator. That was pretty much that scene where he looks up and sees this massive coliseum. But earlier on, if I recall right in the movie, he competed in smaller coliseums. And, these big arenas were in all the major cities of the Roman Empire. And I'm not sure about this, but I think the bullfights are kind of based on this, because if you ever look at the, bullfighting ring in like Mexico, they look a lot like the Colosseum. But the thing is, there was a phrase given to this called bread and circuses. As long as the people were fed, and as long as the people had something to distract themselves, then they would be happy. They didn't care so much of, it could be even major mismanagement in the economy. It could be wars of conquest, which were part of, very much integral to the Roman Empire. Sometimes I wonder if it's part of the American Empire now. You have to have a war going on. We've had a war economy ever since the 40s. We've not gotten off of it, okay? And now you have Hillary Clinton saying we have to strengthen NATO, which is a buzzword for let's pay more money into NATO and have more weapons and so forth. So essentially, as in 1984, it seems war and building materials is to take the excess of society and devote it towards weapons, things that have no real practical value aside from killing people. And, people are okay with that. And so I would actually say sports today, these big corporate sports events, okay, because you got to remember, the teams are owned by people that are very wealthy. And this is something that's actually not really part of our more recent history. Most people think it was, but it wasn't. After the Greek and then the Roman periods, these kinds of things kind of died down. And in American history, you might have games played between, factory people or, companies, or you may have it where it was towns, versus each other, but it was more on an individual basis. It was one of those things like, for instance, when baseball first started, there might be people just in the general viewing audience, which would be probably no more than a junior high school game in the bleachers. But the thing is, it would be more personal. You knew the players. You might actually be one of the players that get called in if one of the other players was sick. Okay? And it wasn't something in which it was a spectacle that was kind of like an entertainment sort of thing. Because actually now sports are entertainment. In America, you have 1/3 of the male population, the 18 and over male population, that is obese. Now, the danger with that is many of the elderly males are not obese. So actually, it's actually statistically, if you're probably looking at just younger men, 18 to let's say early 60s, I don't know, then you're probably seeing that the rate of obesity is actually quite high, higher than that. And the interesting thing upon that is that we're not talking about overweight. Okay? There's fit, there's overweight, and then there's obese. And obese means something that's very dangerous to your health. But yet you look at these big sports events, you turn them on TV and you look at the audiences and you're seeing these guys, they take their shirts off, they paint their chest and stuff like this. And, they move and you could just see the fat kind of flopping around there. Heck, these guys should be out playing a sport, not just watching it. But unfortunately, in our society, we are conditioned to believe this is part of the male rite of passage. Okay? Now, what I mean by that, now think about this. If you're a young man and you see absolutely no interest in sports, and I don't mean you're not interested in doing things that are athletic. I mean you have no interest in team sports. People are going to start thinking you're kind of weird. Okay, this is part of the culturalization of young men in America. You're going to get the, oh, you're a sissy. Oh, there's something wrong with you, and these kinds of things. And so there is this real big push that you're just supposed to fall in line. Now, the thing is that our schools, our public schools, foster this mentality as well. Okay? Now, I'm not trying to be all social justice warrior here, but if you take a look at the females, we have this culture that exists in middle school and high school in which the really pretty girls, are selected and they go out and do their little rally thing in their little short skirts. And I always found, in my first book, Freedom from Conscience, Melanie's Journey, it starts out ultimately with some high school students sitting in the bleachers at the very top, totally uninterested in this pep rally and analyzing what the pep rally is all about. You got the young women out there, trying to hype up the audience. We don't have to go too Freudian on why the young women who are in the rallies are wearing short, revealing clothing. And then the young men, the young warriors come out to battle for the honor of their high school or whatever. And in a way, this goes back to maybe the Greek days in which the Olympics was a sort of a way of competing. City-states would compete with each other so that maybe they would just burn off some of that high testosterone male energy and be satisfied with that and not actually go to war. At least that was the theory. And I actually think that sports actually encourages a war mentality because everything is we're going to beat such and such team. We're going to vanquish them. Many of the sports teams have warriors as part of the official mascot or emblem of the team. And again, I'm not trying to sound all social justice warrior here, because I'm not. I'm just trying to say that there is something that's interwoven into it. You may as well have, there's really not a big difference between some guys with, in, I don't know, where is it, New Guinea, where they have they come out and dance around and everything in their penal shafts and so forth, and traditional tribes. And then there's some other guys from the other tribe that'll do this kind of as a, hey, look, we're number one, and the other team's like, oh, no, we're the best, and so forth. There's really no difference between that and our more refined one, where we go out and spend hundreds of dollars on all the gear for these young men to go out there and compete and, not get hurt while they're banging each other's heads. So, there is this sort of idea that it's part of what we are. Whether you're in Europe, soccer, your soccer team, you have to be part of it. And people get very emotional. People get killed in fights that take place in the stadiums. When something's going wrong, people throw things and sometimes hit players and referees. They get these are very dangerous events. And then a lot of times they're fueled by alcohol, and people act really crazy. But the weird part is you've got tens of, let's say you have a big sporting event in a stadium, and you get tens of thousands of men, usually men, out there, part of the competition. And they're focusing all of this energy, what would Freud call that? Sublimation. You're taking primal energy and putting it somewhere else besides, going out and doing something more instinctive. And it's focused on this, which team can kick this little ball one direction or another, or in America, carry that ball one direction or another. And it seems to, take on something much greater in significance than what it really is. I mean, the average person does not benefit from it. Team members, if you go high enough, they make a lot of money, drive nice cars, get lots of girls, that sort of thing. They're kind of like rock stars in that sense. The sponsors, the people that are advertising, they're making a lot of money off of it, and the media is making a lot of money off of it. And I think that's why the media, all of our news. Now think about this when you're watching a news show. I know you're not going to admit that you watch news, but some of you do. Whether it be local or national, but usually local. Local news puts such a high emphasis on sports. Your local town newspaper, if you still have one, has a huge amount of emphasis on the sports page. And so ultimately it's all part of a feedback loop in which, sports, in a country that people should maybe be out doing sports. Okay? I mean, we have so many people that are either watching real sports out there, other people playing, or we have a situation in which people are doing online gaming, which, again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but they should actually maybe be out doing something physical instead. And then, of course, you have people, a lot of young men who, instead of going out and finding relationships, long-term relationships, I'm not talking about little flings, they're out, they're just watching porn, which, they're watching other people engaged in a sport. Again, it's a spectator type of thing. Maybe with virtual reality, we'll see a change in all of this. People will be participating in some sort of way. I don't know. But ultimately, is this really healthy for our society? We have a society that, and just to back up here, we have situations where the military actually puts money into halftime shows and stuff in which flags are waved and all this kind of stuff. And you're actually seeing this sort of, again, that taps into the whole military industrial complex, get the young men especially, to want to go sign up for the military, or the older men to support military budgets, and candidates who are saying, we need more bombers and we need more missiles because we got to watch out for, and then they'll fill in the blanks, making it more of a team thing. Like, oh yeah, the Russians are doing this. It's almost like a projected sort of situation in which people are thinking, oh my gosh, the Russians are going, the Russians are the other team and we're going to play them and we're not going to let them win. No, they're not going to do this. And oh, they're doing that. Okay, well, we're going to counter with this, and then we're going to up them by doing this, in which this means billions of dollars put into military expenditures when we have a situation where our infrastructure is falling apart. And that's just the part of the infrastructure that depends upon the government, like our basic bridges and roads and those kinds of things. And not to mention our economic infrastructure. We just don't care. We're watching our jobs go away, go bye-bye, and yet our politicians sign bills that make it even more advantageous for big corporations to decide, hey, let's go to another country where we can get it cheaper, because then we're winning, right? The corporation wins, its stockholders win, but the workers, they can find something to occupy their time, I suppose. So see, the thing is, this kind of sports mentality is taking away from people putting their energies into things that actually might mean something in the long run. And again, when I'm talking about fitness, a person can be into fitness and once in a while eat a bunch of donuts, or have just sit back and watch TV and eat some potato chips. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as your overall focus is on staying healthy. But if we have a situation where someone is so devoted to this sports religion, I would say it actually has religious connotations. In fact, maybe the fact that, sports still allows this, kind of male energy type of thing. And I'm not trying to discount female competition and female sports and stuff like that. That's perfectly wonderful. I would hope that women are involved, but I hope they don't ever. I don't think they will actually wind up to where you'll have, a bunch of women who, they buy up a bunch of potato chips, get a bunch of beer, and sit and want to watch the women's, soccer game or something like that. It's different between the genders in this sense. Okay, it is different. The mentality. And the thing is that if people are out of shape, overweight, uninformed, not spending the time necessary to find out not what football player has what statistics, or memorizing who went to the Super Bowl in what year, and instead would use some energy to find out what's going on in the world, what led up to what's going on in the world, and maybe taking the time to actually participate a little bit, this could actually offer up some change in society. Okay? You know that the people who are, I hate to use that term, the 1%. I think it's more like 1% of the 1%. I think 1% maybe is in reference to the people you see that live up on the hill in your particular community. But those people are actually nothing compared to the 1% of the 1% that don't even live in your community but might own a big part of your community. Okay? I don't think they really pay all that much attention to sports. Okay? I don't think whether the person's Republican or Democrat, when you see them out there throwing in the start a baseball game or something, you really don't think they're doing this because they really care, do you? I mean, maybe there's some that do, but I think most of them are just kind of like, okay, well, I'm running for office, or I'm doing this or this or this. This would be a very good PR move if I go and watch this, horse race, or throw in the baseball, or start the football game or something like that. Okay, they're not as interested as you may think. But ultimately, the working class, the lower middle class, they're the ones who really are encouraged to take part in this. And ultimately, they're the ones who are not taking part in the society in general and not really examining what's going on. And, we're getting into a situation where essentially that group of people are being left out. No one cares. There was an article I talked about where it was something about the elite have to stand up to the uninformed masses. It came out a few weeks ago. And there was other articles that had the same kind of thing. Now, I'm not... Answer the phone. Eleanor, answer the phone. On Skype. In about 1 minute, answer the phone. Now, the thing is, I had some Skype problems there. But ultimately, we've really got to examine priorities and why this kind of sports thing is really promoted in our society. Now, I think most of it's fairly just people doing what they've been doing, people doing what they think they're supposed to be doing. But, so I don't think there's some sort of memo that goes out to the local sports people, on your local TV station and says we have to keep the masses.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCI.tv.